Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset from wherever you happen to be. I'm your host, Mike Hingson, and we are glad that you're with us today for another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, our guest is Moustafa Hamwi, and Moustafa he has an interesting thing that he says about himself. He says that he has a unique lifestyle. He's an executive nomad, and he will tell us about that among other things. But he is um, a best-selling author, a mindset coach, and a number of other kinds of things. So I'm not going to give it all away. It's more fun to let him describe it and kind of lead our conversation. So Moustafa, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad you're here.
Thank you, Michael, for having me. I'm really excited to be on your show.
Well, thank you. We really appreciate you being here. And because you are an executive nomad, where are you nomading from today?
In the moment, I'm in Melbourne. So I use Melbourne as a satellite base for kind of Asia and Australia, New Zealand. And then I use Dubai as a satellite base for Europe and kind of the Middle East area.
So where is home base if you are at home base ever?
See, last year I decided to give up everything I own, downsize my life into two bags, one bag that has my formal stuff, one bag that has my casual stuff. And I pretty much gave up everything else that I owned, took a camper van and started driving around Australia. So since then, I'm pretty much an executive nomad. That home is where the heart is. So that's why I have two bases. I use it just as a central area to move from there. But yeah, it depends on the day.
What made you do that? What made you decide to downsize and um, not only take up that kind of lifestyle, but live in the way that you do?
Beautiful question. I mean, that has a lot of layers to it. I'd say my journey of pursuing my own passion in life started at about 2008, when I was in events and nightlife, having an externally very successful life, but feeling empty on the inside. I started reading, researching yoga, meditation, all of these things. 2012, bought a one-way ticket to India. 2013 came back to Dubai, started delivering inspirational talks, and people would say, "You changed my life." And this is really when I knew that that's my passion and purpose. However, also I realized from that trip that me, including, yeah, and a lot of other people, we burden ourselves with a lot of belongings. The mind is a hoarder, and we like to hoard stuff. We like to have stuff, but these things were weighing me down and not enabling me to move as much as I wanted to and to travel and to explore. And especially that the speaking brought me a lot of joy from seeing different parts of the world and different people and different cultures. So I put a mission for myself since about 2000 and probably 14. I said every year I'm going to give away half of everything I owned unconditionally. The only condition is half has to go. I love it. It belongs. It has memories. There's always half that doesn't have that criteria. So every year, half. And funny enough, it took me about 10 years to get rid of almost everything I have. Last year, due to a lot of reasons, including a lot of stress, a lot of things, I've been procrastinating that dream. And obviously, pandemic did not allow a lot of movement.
Mhm.
But last year, I literally woke up one day. I'm like, you know what? Time to do it. What's left is not too much anyway now. And let me downsize and live light. So that enables me to be anywhere I want in the world.
Where did you house yourself during the pandemic?
Whoa. Well, pandemic was an interesting period, very
I'll bet.
challenging. Yeah, very well. It was very challenging for everybody.
Yeah.
For me, however, I found a big challenge brought a lot of opportunities, which one of them is what we're talking about today, is actually my latest book, Slingshot.
Right. So where did you move around a lot during the pandemic, or were you in one place just because it became a little bit of a challenge and an issue to travel?
Well, I came out of a divorce and
Mm.
looking for a fresh start, came to Australia, Melbourne particularly, looking for just a reset. And I arrived here at about 20 March 2020, which is just 2 days before Melbourne locked down,
Mm.
and it became the longest lockdown on the planet. So yeah, it was an interesting period. There wasn't a lot of movement outside the four walls.
So with the lockdown, I'm just curious about hearing how it went in other parts of the world. Do you think the lockdown worked and really helped keep the pandemic from spreading worse than it could have?
That's a very complicated conversation.
Yeah, I know it's and I don't know the answer. I'm just sort of curious.
My personal opinion is no, I totally disagree. I think if anything, it did more damage to people than it helped, because the mental health pressure that it brought on people, including me. This is one of the experiences I had, is the fact that I thought, if I am a speaker and a coach and an author and I work on mindset and I do all of this stuff, and I found it very challenging to handle the pressure that this lockdown brought on me, especially extended period of lockdown, just made life a lot more difficult than it needed to be. So yes, it might have, if you really think at micro level, helped a little bit on reducing spread of a virus, which I think is still very difficult because it's an airborne virus.
Yeah, yeah.
But on the other hand, in the grand scheme of things, it's like trying to shoot a small bird with a bazooka. Yes, you might get the bird, but you've caused so much collateral damage that I don't think it was worth it.
Well, and yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and that included actually that my father caught COVID in Dubai and he was hospitalized, and I did not get the chance to see him before he passed away simply because of the lockdown. So really, how do you put a price tag on that? Well, my dad caught COVID anyway, even during lockdown, but the extended lockdown meant I couldn't see my father. And the question is, well, what did that benefit me? And I eventually, somehow I ended up catching COVID with all the lockdowns and getting sick and all of that. So
were there mask mandates or requirements in Melbourne? And
yeah, Melbourne was one of the most locked down cities in the world. That's a topic of discussion by itself. It's quite it wasn't a pleasant place, and developed a very bad rep of the politicians that were running this place at that time.
What about the whole idea, though, of wearing masks? Do you think that helped slow down or prevent some of the disease spread, and or at least catching the disease? Locking down is one thing, but I'm thinking of just the whole idea of wearing a mask.
Again, very debatable, and I can't speak medically. I can tell you on the level of mental health pressure that it put on people, you pretty much muffled people. Yeah, so that made breathing more difficult for a lot of people, put pressure on a lot of people, and it was through all of these experiences that I feel, if you're talking about a mask, is that put the pressure, lockdown, pressure, masks, all of these things started pushing me further into a place where I needed to find a solution.
Yeah.
And this is where the journey of me writing Slingshot came from.
And we will definitely get to that. I know that when the lockdown happened here, I had just gotten out of New York, where I was delivering a speech before the lockdown happened. In fact, I left earlier on a day that I was scheduled to leave just because of that. And I'm glad that I did. And for me and my wife, our situation with the lockdown was that she's in a wheelchair her whole life, and she also had rheumatoid arthritis. So she had an autoimmune disease. And so I think the lockdown, or at least let me rephrase it, us being locked down was probably a good thing. And we chose to not worry about it a whole lot. At the same time, it did affect me as a speaker also, because I wasn't able to travel and speak. So I did look at other opportunities, which eventually also led to this podcast. I did some things virtually and some speaking virtually, but now with the fact that my wife passed away in November of 2022, and we actually did a podcast about that in January of 2023. And I had somebody interview me about it. But we, with her passing, I'm now starting to ramp up speaking again and working to find engagements. And it's a process, but we'll get there.
Condolences, and I know this was a tough period for everybody, and losing somebody a loved person close to us is never easy, and especially when it happened during a lockdown and during a pandemic. So,
well, again, it happened in 2022, so supposedly a lot of the pandemic is lifted, but I agree with you. I think that it's a very complicated issue, and I am very concerned that while COVID is airborne, and while there are things that we can do that help lower the potential for death, all it takes is another mutation that we don't catch right away for that to all change. And COVID is certainly not something that has gone away yet. I don't buy the conspiracy theorists who talk about the fact that they're just injecting into us ways of tracking us and things like that. I'm really not sensitive to a lot of that, but I also recognize that there are all sorts of challenges, and children clearly had a lot of challenges with it because they couldn't go to school and they didn't do things virtually as well. I think also parents are needing to help that mindset, but that's where we are, and it will all be something that we'll just deal with as we can. I'm sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Tell us about the early Moustafa growing up and all that eventually led to where we are. But tell us about maybe a little bit about your childhood and growing up and what you did and all that before you adopted the lifestyle you have now.
Oh, how far do we want to go? So I'll give you a bit of background.
Whatever.
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of background. I'm Syrian by birth. I moved to Saudi when I was 2 years old, which is where I spent most of my primary school. Went back to Syria for a bit, and then studied my first year of uni in Jordan, then finished my uni in Egypt. And
Uni is?
University
okay. Right.
Cairo, in Alexandria and Cairo.
Right.
And then I went to Dubai to start my career in 2000. So that, and from there, it's been pretty much a long stint of 20 plus years in Dubai.
So what was your career initially when you started after university?
So after I started my uni, my first job was a telesales operator. Because it was the only job I could get. Funny, I came out of uni. I'm the guy who didn't have holidays or weekends. I was always studying, doing courses, doing internships, with the promise that one day I'll end up, getting jobs and everything. And it was a big disappointment because I came into the job market with a big CV, and all my friends were like, Moustafa was going to be the first guy who gets a job. I didn't even get a job interview. And it was a friend of mine who got my dream job, which is to be a marketing researcher. And he ended up passing on his side gig, which was a telesales operator, to me as a favor. So you can imagine how that was, as happy as I am for him, the question to me was like, what did I do wrong? What was wrong with me? And that, funny enough, put a lot of pressure on me to perform and figure out a way around. So I said, in 1 year from now on, I'm going to be working in a multinational. Took me about 13 months from starting that job to end up working in a multinational ad and advertising and public relations agency, handling the PR for Nokia in the Middle East.
So you were doing marketing and PR as opposed to sales for Nokia.
Yes, so that was the start of my proper career. Was in public relations for Nokia, Showtime, Cisco, and many other multinationals. And that pretty much gave me a lot of exposure to a lot of nightlife and events, because back in the days, I'm guessing yourself and anybody watching this show would be old enough to remember a Nokia phone. And
well, I was actually going to say that there was a product. Are you familiar with Ray Kurzweil?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so
Singularity.
Well, the Singularity, but long before that, he was the developer of Omnifont optical character recognition, and he developed a machine that read out loud for blind people. And in late 2009, 2010, 2009, by that time, the software technology had evolved and hardware had evolved, that he was able to put his reading software on, originally, I think it was a Nokia N82, and then it went to a couple of other Nokia phones as well. So for probably about 3 or 4 years, the Nokia phone was the main platform because it had not only enough memory, it had a high enough resolution camera, and you could load the character recognition software as well as a screen reader, so it would verbalize whatever came across the screen. And actually, I was the major distributor for it, and I worked with others and signed them as distributors in the United States. So we sold a lot of the what were called KNFB reader mobiles in the United States. A lot of Nokia phones.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you know how big Nokia was at that time, and
Yeah,
yes, Ray Kurzweil is phenomenal in the tech space, and you're right now that you mentioned. I remember he did have a lot of technology enabling visually impaired people to to consume data and information from the world around them.
yeah, he did some really good things for blind and low vision people, and then of course later he developed the probably I haven't heard anyone disagree with this music synthesizer, and it still was about the most natural sounding one I think I've heard. And then he also was involved in voice recognition, which is cool. So he did a lot of really useful things.
Yeah, amazing stuff, amazing stuff, and it was more amazing the fact that it was on a Nokia handheld.
Yeah, yeah. But then Symbian eventually went away, or the iPhone came along and was a lot more powerful, and then everything sort of migrated. And Nokia was also, I don't know whether they were making bad decisions, but a lot of things were happening that made it much less popular than it had been.
Yeah.
But so how long did you work for Nokia and the other companies like that?
So I was handling the PR for Nokia in the Middle East for a couple of years. And during that period, I got exposed to all the nightlife and events because they were the sponsor for all these beautiful
Mm.
things. And that made me one of the most popular guys in Dubai because I had backstage access to every single event that was happening. And that meant that I eventually started partying more and more, started throwing after parties. And next thing I know, I decided to leave the company I'm working for and open up my own event agency. And
Ah,
that led me to growing my business from 4 people, 45 people, multi-million-dollar turnover. And my life got crazier and crazier. Daytime, we're doing conferences, seminars, events, and nighttime, we're sponsoring concerts and parties and things like that.
that must have been quite a challenge and tearing you in so many different directions.
Well, it was exciting for a young guy in his 20s to have that, a video clip lifestyle. But after a while, it did burn me out, and it made
Mm-hmm.
me reflect on a lot of things in life. First and foremost was, what am I doing with my life? What, like, all of this fine is short-term, short-lived joys, but they're not fulfilling at all, and they don't make me feel better by the day. If anything, day by day, they start becoming less enjoyable, and they start making me feel emptier and emptier. And this eventually led me to leave everything behind and buy a one-way ticket to India on a search, on a soul search journey, finding passion and purpose.
Yeah, what you finally discovered was that all that nightlife stuff and all the other things that you were doing were great, but where was it really getting you, Mustafa?
It was, I mean, look, I was making money, I was partying and everything, but it
Yeah,
was not
but
fulfilling me. It wasn't getting me far. It wasn't getting me far. And that's really sometimes the biggest challenges in life are the biggest blessings in
yeah,
hindsight. And when we're able to go through the experience, we realize that there's something in it for them that makes us ask deeper questions.
and that's the issue, and that's what I was getting at is that in reality, all that other stuff, all that physical stuff, and so on was fine, but and as you said, where does it really get you, and how is it really helping you emotionally and your inner self, the inner Mustafa, and it wasn't really helping that at all.
100%.
So you
100%.
went to India. What did you do in India?
Well, it was just that I remember what my mom called me. She's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I quit my job and I'm buying a one-way ticket to India." She's like, "Are you crazy? What are you going to do in India?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to go get lost." It was one of those things where I did not know, but I knew I had to go in that direction. It was an intuition to go to India, but I did not know exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for an answer, obviously,
Yeah.
not no answer for what. And along the journey, I met by coincidence or a universal alignment, a guru or swami who had been in caves for 13 years. He had been meditating in solitude in caves for 13 years. And he had came out a few years before I met him. And in one of the interactions with him, I'm asking him about life, meaning of things, and so on. And he goes to me, he used to play with his beard. He goes, do you know what you are thirsty for? Because if you do not know what you are thirsty for, you cannot quench your thirst. And that was a big aha for me. It's like, I'm searching for an answer, but I never actually focused on what the question is. And a realization since then till today, especially when I got into coaching, the real value is in the question. The best thing you can do is ask a question, because a well thought, well designed question gives you a valuable answer. And at that time, I did not know what I was looking for. Throughout my journey, then a few months later, I end up coincidentally walking into a hospital, getting myself checked up, and I discover I had a medical condition that was labeled non-curable. And that freaked me out, because I had to reflect and ask myself, what if this was a cancer? What if this was something that was going to end my life? You know, what meaning did I have in my life? Did my life have any value? And reflecting on that, I realized that the answer to the question of what am I thirsty for, the answer was I'm thirsty for impact, to be able to know that I have left a positive impact on this planet. So then 2013, I ended up buying a ticket back to Dubai, and I started delivering inspirational talks called Cavalli to Manali, which is talking about the journey of going from the Cavalli Club nightlife in Dubai into Manali, where I met my Swami. And a few months later, a random person sees me sitting in a cafe in Dubai and just walks up to me, goes, "Hey, you're that speaker guy." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You did your talk about India." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You changed my life." And that was an aha moment for me of, the answer to the question is I am seeking impact in my life, and I know I can have impact by sharing my story, by doing inspirational talks, and by doing coaching.
Yeah. I absolutely relate to what you're saying, because as I tell people, after September 11th and escaping from the World Trade Center, people started asking me to come and tell my story, and they wanted to hire me to do it. As I say, I decided that selling life and philosophy was a whole lot more rewarding and a lot more fun than selling computer hardware. Yeah, I have to earn a living at it. And I had a wife who needed me to earn an income as well, and I still need to do that. But the rewards, and when people tell you how you've changed their life, those kinds of comments really are what it's all about, as you well know.
100%. And sometimes we feel we are as inspiring as we think we are, and until we meet the next inspiring person. So the reality is not that I am inspiring in the absolute, it's just that I've had an inspiring experience. However, since I got on this journey, I realized that there's so many more inspiring people, more than me. And literally, until we spoke last time before the episode and you told me your story, I'm like, wow, here you go. There's one more. And what I love about this, being in this industry, is actually the amazing surroundings and people that you hang around and you communicate with. But this is not to say that someone who's not in the industry is not inspiring. I feel I've had so many experiences where I've been inspired by some of the most normal, average day experiences, because they also remind us that the passion and purpose is a day-to-day pursuit. It's not just about a mission of changing someone's life, because a mother who's sacrificing and dedicating her life to her children is as inspiring, if not more inspiring.
Absolutely. And I think for me, the issue is that I love to meet people. I think everyone inspires me to some degree, some more than others, and there are some that I don't need to ever meet. Just observing them, if they inspire other people, that's fine. But I also think that it's important that as we inspire, as we speak, as we do the things we do, all of those affect our lives. And so every inspiration, every time we meet someone, it affects us. And I think it helps us, I was going to say codify, but it helps us more specifically understand what our philosophy is, and it helps clarify it and helps us move forward. And I think that's very important.
100%. It is. There's There's a saying in Arabic, I'll try to translate to English, but it says the wisdom uh, is the holy grail and pursuit of the wise. Wherever they might find it, they will grab it. So really, any experiences that would help, any interactions that would help us as a person and as a human being grow is really the pursuit, should be the pursuit of everyone.
Yeah. And if we can contribute to that in one way or another, then that's great. Um, for my part, I don't try to quantify how inspiring I am. My goal is to inspire where I can. And I know that not everyone who hears me necessarily goes away and will be as inspired as other people, but they're probably looking for other things. On the other hand, I know that I have contributed to inspiring some people. There was an article. Oh, well, I delivered a speech in 2014, and last year somebody wrote an article about that talk and said some very positive and kind and nice things about my talk. And I love to say to people, how many times do you remember a speaker 9 years later and decide to write about him? So he must be doing something right. And what I do right is what other people feel I'm doing right. And as long as they feel that, then I'm going to continue to do what I can do. And certainly my message will evolve over time as your message evolves over time as we learn more. And that's very important in what it's all about.
100%, 100%. And it is a journey, not a goal. I think
Correct.
the whole conversation about mindset, and kind of a beautiful segue into talking about mindset here is when I was talking to you last time, and then I, was talking about my book and the mindset and everything. And you talked about your experience, leaving the Trade Center during the 9/11, or escaping more than leaving, and I asked you how challenging was it for you. You actually gave me a huge mindset shift, talking about that probably that was a more natural environment for you, not being able to see, compared to someone like me who's used to external visual references to be able to find my way. You probably had better chances and better mindset being able to deal with everything that was going around you, which was very impressive, and a mindset shift for me just having that conversation with you.
Well, I think it's important, though, the other part about that is, and as I think I explained a little bit, I spent a fair amount of time learning all that I could about the World Trade Center, what to do in an emergency, where all of the exits were, what the process was. And so, whereas sighted people typically want those visual cues, I knew that if I were ever in an emergency in the building, and what started that was that, of course, there was a bombing there in 1993. It wasn't something that caused a lot of damage, but it had happened, right? And so the bottom line is that being in that building, now, right, there had now been something that happened, and there could be something else that happens. So I needed to know. And also, I was the leader of that office. And so it was important for me to make sure I knew all I could, because it might very well be that we would find ourselves in a situation where there weren't visual cues for people, smoke, and other things like that, which we didn't really have in the building that day, but still, we could have. And it taught me how to be more observant. So, for example, when we got into the stairwell, I began smelling an odor, and it took me about 3 or 4 floors to realize I was smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. None of us had any idea what really happened. The airplane hit 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. And as I love to tell people, the last time I checked, Superman and X-ray vision were fictitious. So none of us knew what happened. And in fact, none of the people on the stairs from all the offices where we were, and that we and with the people we encountered, hundreds of people all the way down, no one knew, because we were all on the other side of the building. And so I smelled this odor, and it took me a while to suddenly realize I'm smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. And I observed that to other people, and they said, yeah, we were trying to figure out what that is. We must have been hit by an airplane, but we didn't know why. We didn't know any of the details. But again, it's learning to pay attention to the details, and it's really learning to have all the knowledge that we can possibly have. Visual cues are really lovely as far as they go, but that's visual cues that don't necessarily really point to the level of knowledge that we can have if we focus on maybe learning how to deal with an emergency as a blind person should. And I say it that way because I know of a lot of blind people who don't take the time to do what I did. And so they might very well be in a fearful situation. But that was my makeup, and that's what I chose to do.
Amazing.
And, I think it's important. And I think, in fact, and so the article talked about some of that. And I've given a number of speeches on emergency preparedness and safety, and talk about the fact that people need to learn about what to do in an emergency. Don't rely on reading signs, because that may or may not work for you. And there have been a few situations where, after giving a talk like that, people have come up to me, like somebody who is involved in running a power company for a state. And he said, "You raise a really good point. We're going to figure out, and we want your help to figure out a way that the people can evacuate from our generating stations, our electric generating stations, if there's a fire and there's smoke, so that they can't see where the signs are to tell them where the emergency exits are." And we figured that out.
Wow, amazing.
It is part of what we need to do. So again, I'll contribute where I can. I'm not an expert on electric generator plants, but I know what I did. And if I can help people then and inspire them in that way, that's great. But, we all have our experiences, and hopefully we can contribute and help other people. And that's what it's about, of course.
Beautiful.
So for you, I want to go back. So your Swami said, "What are you thirsty for?" Did you have an answer for him, or how did you deal with that at the time?
Well, at the time, I did not have an answer. What ended up happening, obviously, is what I just mentioned earlier,
Right.
is that my journey of first discovering I had a medical condition, and I had to ask myself, well, if this was a cancer, if it was undiscovered now and could have turned into a cancer, would have I been proud of my life and what that was? And the answer was, well, what I was thirsty for is to have meaning and to have impact.
Yeah.
But I did not know how I'm going to do it. And eventually the experience in Dubai of somebody saying you changed my life made me understand that the how. So the what was impact, and the how was speaking, coaching, and sharing my story.
Did you ever get to go back and tell your guru what you discovered?
I actually not. I discovered I got to see him again on the same journey while I'm still in India. And actually, that's why I went back to him after I discovered I'm seeking purpose. But at that time, I did not discuss that with him, because remember, I was still dealing with my own medical condition. So my priority was me, because as much as, yes, of course, we want to help, but the reality is I can't help anybody if I'm dead. So my priority was healing and dealing with my own stuff. And I spent a lot of time with him, but that was not a conversation I had with him as much as reflecting deeper and deeper on a lot of other things in life with him.
But that question really did change your life in so many ways over time.
100%.
Yeah. Which is of course, probably what he intended, as long as you were willing to think about it. And clearly you were. So that was great.
Yeah.
So, a lot of us, I believe that as we go through life, we make choices. And I love to realize that I can trace a lot of where I am today back to choices that I made some time ago. And the choices that brought me here, for example, whatever that is. But in dealing with our past and dealing with choices, is that an important thing to do, or do we just forget our past and we just live in the moment?
Beautiful question. And what you're asking about is kind of the whole premise and trigger behind my book, Slingshot. And the analogy of Slingshot is that, yes, we do need to go and take a step back to deal with our past, but only enough to discover what is holding us back. But then we have to let go of that so we can slingshot into the future. So the answer is not an absolute yes or not an absolute no. It is a yes, and how do we move on after we take that step back? Otherwise, we get stuck in the past, which happened to me for a while I was stuck in the space of healing. And all the healing space does is dig deeper and deeper. And it's like peeling an onion. You take one layer out and there's another layer and another layer and another layer. And that alone becomes an addiction. So reality is, yes, take a step back, but let go so you can accelerate into the future.
So how does the healing process then actually work?
One of the biggest elements of healing and growth in life is actually awareness. So the first step is if one is able to step back and face the reality of what happened. And one system I use in Slingshot, the book, is actually we ask people to write their story first. So the way we do it, and I can do it here is with you, is ask, okay, if your life was a movie, what genre would it be? Okay. And then you'd put a name to that movie. So you say, okay, the genre of my life is, and I'll give you an example. The genre of my life was at a period when everything was not going well in my life, losing my business and so on. The genre was a sad drama.
Mm-hmm.
And the title of my movie was Dreams Broken on the Shores of Reality. I mean, I say it now and I laugh at it, but at that time I was very depressed, sitting and staring into the horizon at every sunset, going, "Oh, my life, everything is not working." And then the story of my life was I'm a failure because of my upbringing, because I didn't have a good English education, I didn't have a proper university education. I had a uni, but it wasn't something that is inspiring. And all these stories that the outside world fills into our head. And I was looking for an excuse for any failed experience, which is not failure in the ultimate. And then reframe that story and through the exercises that go through the book. So what happened is by reframing a lot of those stories, the genre of my movie changed from a sad drama into an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the title of my movie was An Adventure of a Lifetime, A Life to Die For. So then suddenly that little mental shift and reframing of the story showed me the best side of the life that I'm living and allowed me to capitalize on the opportunities.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'd say this is a simple exercise we can give to any listeners to really start by asking yourself, if my life was a movie, what genre would it be? And be honest with yourself, because the healing element here does not work. So if I was to pretend that I'm positive about my life, I don't believe positivity works. It's a bunch of bollocks, because positivity, if you're not truly inspired from inside, is just putting makeup on something.
Yeah.
It doesn't change the reality of what that thing is. We have to face honor and acknowledge and understand that we are sad, that we are upset, that we are angry, that we are hurt. These are all natural emotions. And the challenge is throughout now this industry, unfortunately, the self-help industry, people are feeding people, no, you got to be positive and you got to be this and you got to be that. You can only be what you are congruent with. And that has to come from genuinity, from authenticity, and from truth. And if your truth and genuinity and authenticity in that moment is sadness, then honor it. Because you can only resolve some emotions, or the emotions, any emotions you have, you can only resolve them when you go through them, not over them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they say get over it, you cannot get over it. You have to get through it. And once you get through it, you dissolve it, and then healing can happen. It's like if you have something under your skin that's an infection that is so bad that it's starting to develop pus. The only way to heal it is to actually cut it open, clean it, and then stitch it again. If you try to ignore it, it doesn't work. So really, awareness is a big element in any healing journey.
For me, I kind of view positivity a little bit different than I think you're describing. And I appreciate what you're saying. I think that positivity is, in a sense, focusing on dealing with the things that are going to help you advance and trying to not focus so much on the negative things that you can leave behind you. Maybe another way to put it is, so many of us worry about so many different things, and most of the time we don't have any control over them. If we would just focus on the things that we can control and leave the rest alone, we would be a lot more productive and a lot less stressful in our lives.
I totally agree with you. However, I would still want to debate the positivity conversation. And I'll ask you a simple question, and to anybody who's listening, would you consider yourself a glass half empty or glass half full guy?
I guess I would probably view myself more as a glass half full guy than a glass half empty guy.
Beautiful. And I'll tell you, I personally disagree. And I would tell you, you're probably not that. And I'll explain why.
Okay.
I'm a guy who says the glass is half empty, half full, and how can I fill the empty? So
Hey,
this
and
is
I'll buy that. Yeah.
yeah. So you
Yeah.
are the guy who's practical, and practicality versus positivity are two different stories, because what happens sometimes, people who are just focusing on the positivity never also understand where they need to develop, and they need to grow, and they become stale.
Right.
And
And
they
that's,
aim that it's just a labeling conversation that we're having. Of course, you got to
yes, it
have
is.
a positive attitude, and of course, you got to look at the glass half full. And if you focus on the negativity in your life, you'll never get out of that. But also equally, if you don't acknowledge and understand that these things require growth, then you also never grow there. So it's not a black or white conversation. It's a conversation of totality, of looking at the half full and half empty. Otherwise, people get misillusioned, and that's why I keep talking about the self-help industry, because it sells a lot better to talk about positivity. People don't want to hear about the hard work they have to do to fill in the empty
Mm-hmm.
half of the glass. Nobody wants to talk about, okay, you talk about positivity, but nobody understands the level of hard work, as you said, you had to go through to be prepared to deal with a situation where you're not getting visual cues because you had to depend on other things. That took work. That didn't happen by itself. So what I talk about here is not just the positivity, it's the totality of the approach of being truly realistic and honoring that the struggles in your life do bring their own opportunities, and they allow you to grow only when you own them rather than ignore them.
Yeah. And again, for me, and as I was describing, the whole concept of positivity is really dealing with the negativity that we focus on so much that we don't need to have around us if we choose to deal with it. And we can, there are things that go on that are challenges to us, but we have the choice of dealing with those challenges. And I think that's the important thing. As I tell people, we had no control over September 11th happening. And I am not convinced that all the communications between all the government agencies would have figured it out in the US, having read the September 11th report. But what we all have control over and all had control over is how we deal with September 11th. And we can choose to deal with it as a horrible thing. And it was a horrible thing, but we could choose to deal with it in a very negative way in our lives, or we can learn and grow from it. And I think that's the issue of making a choice that helps move us forward and get away from the negative stuff. And I've met some people who were very negative after September 11th, and I could see years later that they were locked in a mindset that wasn't ever going to help them be more productive and help them grow.
Beautifully said. And it's that mindset conversation about how to really not get stuck in your past story. And however, I only talk about the mindset mastery as a second stage to the healing. And the
Mm-hmm.
healing is what requires us to look at the half empty, so we
Correct.
can acknowledge what needs to work and then work on the half full. And in that, we'll have a totality of of a full glass that is always serving us and never get stuck in diving into negativity layer after layer after layer. So it's always a yin and yang approach. It's a coherent approach. So agree on that point.
Yeah, it still becomes an issue of growth and of choice. And I would never say don't pay attention to the negativity part. You've got to know that it's there before you can deal with it. And it's more an issue of, again, the choices that we make. And I agree with you. Mindset is a part of it. And you can talk about, oh, I got this mindset. Well, do you really? How is that helping you advance? Do you really have it? And it's so often the case that people talk a good talk, but they're not really walking it, which is part of the problem.
100%. And not just that, it's actually having the courage and the humility to acknowledge where we are now and then working towards where we want to be.
Right.
Otherwise, it's fake. It's just all the rura, hoo-ha, motivational. Yes, 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 you can do it. You can do it. Yeah, well, guess what? I do a lot of extreme sports, and one of them is skydiving. Skydiving means opening the airplane door at 13,000 feet and jumping out. If I don't acknowledge that one of the things is I'm not a bird and I don't have wings, and for me to do that, I have to have a parachute. So in a way, it is a weakness not to have a wings. But then when I acknowledge it and I understand it, then the strength there's the design and the engineering that goes behind the parachute that I have to make sure is strapped onto me, that I have to make sure is ready, allows me now to complete that picture of the glass is half empty, where I'm not a bird, but with the parachute, my glass becomes half full.
Right. And the joy of skydiving, I've never done it. That's okay. But the joy of skydiving and the experience and what you see when you're doing it and you land and so on, that fills up a lot of the rest of the glass for the moment.
100%. It's one of those amazing experiences that I'd highly recommend you do.
I want to do it someday. I just haven't. I haven't tried it. It is a doable thing. I know some blind people who have done it.
Yeah, I mean, you do a tandem anyway, the first jump. So maybe this is your cue. Somebody will be strapped onto you, and they will do it.
Yeah. And the other blind people who I know did it in tandem, and that's fine. I still get to experience it, and I've done a number of things like that. I've flown an airplane, and flew it for about an hour. The trick is, as I tell people, you just stay high enough that you don't hit the mountains, and you're good.
Amazing.
And it works. And I've driven a car and some other things like that, although I had some directions. The technology is getting better, not autonomous vehicles, but literally it is possible. There is technology so that a blind person can drive a car. If you ever want to explore that, there's a website. It's called www.blinddriverchallenge.org. And you can actually see a car that was developed with the technology so that a person who is blind can get behind the wheel and truly get the information to drive the car. And I did the simulator, but I haven't driven the car. But again, a lot of adventures. I've traveled to a number of countries, and I travel alone. And it's part of what I do. And I love doing it and inspiring people. And I've spent a number of days in countries where I don't speak the language, and we had to rely on an interpreter to help with doing a speech. But it's so fun and so rewarding when, again, people come up and say, we really appreciate what you say.
Amazing.
So it's a lot of fun. Well, tell us a little bit more about Slingshot and what makes Slingshot and your methodology different than other things.
A beautiful question, Michael. It's basically the practicality of it, as you figured with this conversation about, half full or half empty. My approach is very pragmatic and practical. So I always like to have things that, number one, are coherent. So Slingshot really offers the healing and the mindset mastery together. The schools of thought out there generally have been kind of, unipolar in a way, where they're either trying to talk about coaching, which is just go mentality. You can make it, you can do it. It's all in your mind. Or other schools that are just healing and let's dig into the past and let's be in the feeling, but that is a never-ending journey. You don't know how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
This book offers a coherent approach where you take a step back to heal, and then you release to mindset master. The second thing that makes the approach in the book Slingshot special is that it is also results driven, because myself, I've struggled a lot throughout my journey with a lot of self-proclaimed gurus and coaches and things like that promise the sun, the moon, and the sky, but don't deliver results. So I've always promised myself, whenever I deliver something, it'll be measurable results. So everything in the book is structured. You read on one page, but then the practical, it's not just theory, the practice is on the other page. You fill in the blanks, and you yourself will get immediate results in that moment to understand it. And third thing is that it is actually a continuous journey. So the kind of books I offer are not just theory, they're practical, and they entice you to reuse them all the time. So what happens is, okay, you do one exercise at a certain point of time, but that doesn't mean it's not a one-time transformation.
Mm-hmm.
You get immediate results. But I say in the last chapter of the book, I say, keep brushing your teeth. And that's an analogy of You can go to the doctor to get teeth whitening, but if you don't brush your teeth daily, you don't get the consistent results. And the same thing with the book that I offer. It's a companion that allows people to consistently keep working with the book at any stage of life when they're having challenges.
And that makes sense, to have a way to keep being able to go back and re-examine whatever it is that is guiding you along the way. And you have to do that. I think that any decent book or any decent kind of instruction that we allow ourselves to do has to be something where we can continue to do it. It isn't just a one-time thing.
100%.
So that makes a lot of sense. Well, you know, we're always talking about mastering our destiny and really becoming a whole lot better than we are. And we've also talked about the mindset. Why is it important to master your mindset on the way to mastering your destiny, if that's a relevant question to ask?
Amazing question, Michael. And I'll give you a simple example. What mindset does is our mindset impacts our behaviors, and our behaviors impact our actions, and our actions impact the results. And naturally, the results feed our mindset. So, and that becomes either a positive loop or a negative loop. When our mindset is inspired, using your terminology, positive, I'd like to call it more inspired, determined, in a mastery state, then we behave in that way, and our probabilities of taking inspired actions increases. And as the actions increase, probability of success increase. And then the more we succeed, then we start reaffirming ourselves that we are really successful. But the same thing can happen in a negative way, because if we're having a negative attitude, we will not do our best. And when we don't do our best, the results probably will not be the best, which then reaffirms that things do not work for us, and it becomes a negative feedback loop. And if you think about the importance of a mindset, it's like a car driver. Imagine a supercar. Okay, what's your favorite? Talking about cars, what would be your favorite supercar?
Oh gosh, not being much of a driver. Oh, I'll just say a Cadillac. What the heck?
Okay, let's say a super Cadillac. Yeah, the racing Cadillac has, I think it's a
Or
CTS.
let's say a Ferrari. Okay, that's more racing. So we'll say a Ferrari.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Let's take a Ferrari. Okay, let's take
Okay.
a red Ferrari. Typical image in people's head is a red Ferrari.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a Ferrari. Now imagine that Ferrari being driven by your average taxi driver. How much will he or she be able to get out of that Ferrari? Like an average taxi driver can get out of a taxi. Now imagine the same Ferrari, same red color, driven by Michael Schumacher.
Mm-hmm.
Being a professional race driver, he will get 110% out of that car. Same car, same color, same everything. Two different drivers, two different results.
I would only say, if you're comparing it to New York cab drivers, some of those guys are pretty good, but I'm just being silly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in a funny way, yes, but still, they're
I hear what you're saying. No, I hear what you're saying.
Nowhere near as good. I mean, they would probably get skidding with it and move really fast, but they would never be as good as somebody who's
never.
Seconds. And the reality is, in between those two, the driver is the mindset. So the same, you split Moustafa into two, and you put a taxi driver in to drive this as driving a taxi, and you put then a professional Formula One driver. The driver of the Mustafas, the one that's driving more professional, will get professional results, and that's how life goes on. So that's why it's very important for us to master our mindset in the pursuit of mastering destiny. Now, how I discovered that is when I was doing my work with passion early on in my speaking career. So about 10 years back, with the Live Passionately book, I would help people discover their passion, and they would know with absolute certainty, this is it, what I want to do. I want to do this. I want to pursue that. It's going to make me fulfilled. But then self-doubt kicks in, and anxiety, fear, limiting beliefs. And suddenly they would quit on their dream before they even start, because they're so scared of the outcome and their mindset is not ready. So suddenly they've got a dream of a Ferrari, but a mindset of a rickshaw or a tuk-tuk or a small car, and then they're never able to accelerate their life. So without that mindset upgrade, people don't go very far in life. Or even if they stay where they are and convince themselves, I'm happy, pandemic has taught us that nobody's immune to challenges in life. Because even when everybody thought they're immune, everybody got it tough during pandemic. So reality life is going to hit hard sooner or later. And the more our mindset is upgraded and prepared, the better for us.
And the other part about that, let's go back to the cab driver and Michael Schumacher. The reality is, with a mindset, you can develop and change your mindset and develop a different mindset. So it is certainly possible, depending on the drive of the cab driver and his motivations or her motivations. They might develop the skills to be a professional race car driver, but they have to work at it.
100%, 100%. There's that funny story of every overnight success takes 10 years. People only see the final outcome, but they don't see how much work it took that person to prepare and train. It's the 10,000 hours that we all have to put in. And people have that dream, have that aspiration, but don't have the mental tenacity to stay at it day in, day out to reach their goal. And this is where mindset mastery becomes very important.
How do people develop this kind of mindset mastery methodology, and how do they develop the ability to master their mindset?
Beautiful question. And that part of the second part of Slingshot, the book, answers with a lot of exercises. However, I will give a couple of exercises that would make it easy for anybody listening to apply a little bit of those. So first question I like to ask people is actually, what would you regret if you did not pursue your passion? So what is that regret? So if you say, I'm dreaming of becoming a speaker, a coach, and an author, because I struggled with that at the beginning. Remember, I didn't fly out of India to become who I am today. I struggled with that self-limiting beliefs. So if you ask yourself, what would I regret by not pursuing that dream or that passion? Then
I would, and my answer would be, I would regret not knowing how far I could take it and what I could do with it.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. And then you keep going. So what you do is, I want a long list. I want at least 10 or 12, a list of 10 or 12 items. So you keep going. Okay, I'm not going to discover how far can I go. Right. I will be sad. I will lose my self-confidence because then, I've doubted myself.
And I'll always wonder, what if?
Which is the worst.
That's me, but that's what I would do. Yeah.
Everybody, not just you, because that's what happens is the regret for what we did not do is bigger than the regret for what
and then we talk ourselves into having taken that position. Well, I wouldn't have been able to succeed. How do you know?
Deep inside, we know this is
exactly right.
People will, when you question yourself, you will lose confidence in yourself, and that's the negative self-limiting belief cycle that I talked about. So what happens is, you put that list of what would I regret if I did not pursue my passion? And then that gives you a motivation away from. So you run away from that ugly space of, regrets.
Right.
Then I give another exercise and I say, what's the best that could happen if you pursue that passion and that goal? So that gives you a motivation too. So, okay, so one regret is, I would never know how far I could go. So now if I ask you, what's the best scenario if you pursue that passion?
I succeed.
You succeed. And then what are the positive outcomes there?
People ask me to speak. They tell me that I changed their life.
Beautiful. So you get to speak, you get to change people's lives, you get to travel, you get to explore the world, and then you put that list. So now you've got a motivation too. So you've got one motivation away from the regret, one motivation towards the aspiration. And typically there's a blockage there of, but what if this does not work? Then I ask people to write a list of what's the worst that could happen if you pursue that goal or passion. So let's say you decided to speak. What's the worst that could happen?
I didn't get many speaking engagements. I wasn't able to change lives.
And then I didn't charge as much as I could charge.
And I didn't charge as much as I could have charged, right?
And then you put that list, and then this is a list where I'd say, well, get over it. So what if you didn't get as many speaking gigs? You just keep marketing and promoting. So what if you couldn't charge as much as you want? You just keep working till you can raise your prices over time. So what if you did not inspire the millions that you thought you would? Well, guess what? Inspiring one person is as good as inspiring a million. It's still a life that you have changed. So once we put all of these stories that, that we tell ourselves of why I don't want to do, so the away from the what would I lose by not pursuing the passion, and then what would I gain by pursuing that passion, and what's the worst that could happen if I pursue that passion or goal. Those three things are the simplest excerpts I could give from Slingshot the book that would help people mindset master their life.
The other, well, going back to the third thing, the other part about that is, and maybe it's the physicist in me or the way I look at things, if I don't succeed at it, then I need to also ask myself why. And I need to teach myself by learning what maybe I'm not doing right, or what I'm doing, but I could do better, and figuring out how to improve. So I'm a firm believer in the fact that people can learn how to overcome challenges like that. I do agree with you, but it is also important then to take it further and say, well, why am I not succeeding? What is the deal? Go back and learn some more.
100%. And but you can only do that when you have developed that level of mindset mastery where you're not looking at limitation. You see the exit. And that's why, if you remember, I said this book is not a one-time use. It's a manual that you keep using, because every time you use it, you slowly develop the habit of not paying too much attention to the negative outcomes and focusing more on the positive outcomes,
Right.
And then building a bridge of what is needed for me to get there. So one other exercise we use there, which is, follows the methodology that you're talking about, is called use what you have to get what you want. So it's about putting a list of what resources do I have. And I think you are an amazingly walking example of somebody who has done that, because if you were to focus on what you don't have, you're going to go, hold on, but I can't see. So how am I on earth going to be able to do podcast interviews? But you did not focus on what you did not have. You focused on what you had, and you capitalized on it. Your ability to ask deep questions, deep reflective questions, to be passionate about it, to figure out the technology around it, capitalize on your technology background to be able to find the tech that supports your journey. That's a beautiful example on how you can master your mindset and master your destiny.
Well, and for me, and it goes back to, again, the thing we talked about and I mentioned earlier, choices. I can trace back why I have that mindset today. It goes back in part to my parents, who said, you can do whatever you choose to do. There's more than one way to do things. It goes back to training and getting a master's degree in physics, and very intelligent physics professors. Like my academic advisor was Dr. Fred Reines, who was the discoverer of the neutrino and won a Nobel Prize for it, although it was long after I knew him that he won it. But he also was very clear on there's always a lot of ways to accomplish something. You have to look for it. And so many people have said those kinds of things to me along the line that I realized blindness isn't the problem. It's our attitudes about it that are the problem. And the sooner we get over making that the problem and recognizing that other people's attitudes are their issues, I need to continue to do what I can do, and I need to use my knowledge to be able to move forward. That's the important part.
100%. Love it.
Well, if people want to learn more about what you do and maybe talk about or explore being a coach and also get Slingshot, how do they do that?
Thank you for asking, Michael. I'm really grateful for you having me on your show, and for your listeners for listening in. So I would love to give everybody a gift and an opportunity to heal their past and master their mindset. So I will give a free e-copy of my book, Slingshot, the practical guide to becoming a master of your destiny, not a victim of your history. The only thing they need to do is go to mustafa.com/slingshot. So that is spelled Moustafa, MOUSTAFA.com/slingshot, like a slingshot. And over there, there'll be a form that they would fill. Typically, that's only for people who bought the book. But for your guests, what they have to do is put their name and email. And then in the code section, they just have to put Unstoppable, which is in reference to your show. And they will be able to download a free e-copy of this book and my previous books, including the Live Passionately book. They'll be able to download a bonus meditation and several other amazing bonuses. So I'm really grateful to you and to all your audience.
Well, thank you for offering that, and I hope people will take advantage of that. What other forms is the book available in? Obviously, it's in print. It's an it is in print. It is in eBook, and I'm actually in the process of recording the audiobook very soon also. Are you reading it?
I will do it. That's the reason it just took a little bit longer, because I'm planning to read it myself.
Good for you. When we did Thunderdog, I didn't read it, and I'm coming out with a new book, learning to control fear. It's called Live Like a Guide Dog, and they actually have already arranged for someone to read it, and that's fine. I don't need to be the reader rabbit, but
You can always record an intro.
that is exactly right, and I'll make sure that we work that out.
Well done.
Well, I want to thank you again for being here, and I want to thank all of you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned a lot. I certainly have, and I appreciate Moustafa taking time with us today. Love to hear your thoughts, by the way, so if you would, please email me and tell me what you think. You can email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. So that's michaelhi @accessibe.com, or go to our podcast page, which is www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. And Michael Hingson is MichaelHingson, all one word. If you're looking for a speaker, I would love to hear from you. We are always looking for speaking opportunities to talk and inspire and teach. So if any of you out there need a speaker, love to hear from you about that. And wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. We value those a lot. We value your input and your thoughts, and especially your ratings. So once more, though, Moustafa, I want to thank you for being here and taking the time with us.
Thank you very much, Michael. And to all the listeners, remember, you are the master of your destiny.